There's a quiet myth that after 50, the body begins a slow, unavoidable surrender, that weight gain is simply the tax of aging. But biology tells a more hopeful story. The human body is not a machine that wears out on schedule. It is an adaptive ecosystem, constantly listening, recalibrating, and responding to how we live. When we talk about losing weight safely after 50, we are not declaring war on the body. We are learning to negotiate with it. We are learning its language, hormones, muscle fibers, metabolic rhythms, and the subtle intelligence of recovery. Weight loss at this stage is less about force and more about partnership. Preserved muscle after 50 is less about aesthetics and more about metabolic signaling, because muscle tissue acts as a dynamic energy regulator that constantly communicates with the brain, liver, and endocrine system. When muscle fibers are routinely challenged through resistance, they trigger molecular pathways that elevate insulin sensitivity, meaning nutrients are more likely to be directed toward repair instead of storage. This process increases mitochondrial activity, effectively upgrading the cell's capacity to convert fuel into usable energy rather than conserving it as fat. Aging muscle is highly adaptable. Even modest mechanical tension stimulates protein synthesis, reminding the body that strength remains biologically relevant. Without this signal, the body interprets inactivity as a cue to economize, lowering resting metabolic expenditure and reinforcing energy preservation. Consistent loading reverses that narrative by activating satellite cells responsible for muscle repair, which supports tissue quality and metabolic demand. Importantly, recovery nutrition, especially adequate amino acids, provides the raw materials required for this rebuilding, creating a feedback loop where effort and nourishment reinforce one another. Over time, this repeated stimulus recalibrates hormonal responses, including growth signaling and glucose regulation, allowing the body to handle energy with greater precision. The subjective experience often feels like renewed steadiness because stronger muscle improves joint mechanics, circulation, and neural coordination. Each training session becomes a biological conversation that says resources are needed, adaptation is expected, and vitality is still under construction, prompting the metabolism to remain engaged instead of retreating into conservation, continually negotiating how energy is stored, released, and reinvested in living tissue that responds to demand with measurable biochemical adjustments that favor resilience and sustained metabolic activity while signaling that the organism is active, adaptive, and prepared for further challenge, encouraging ongoing cellular investment in strength, efficiency, and responsive energy handling across daily movement patterns that continuously reinforce. Nutrition after 50 functions less as a calorie ledger and more as a regulatory language that shapes hormonal tone, appetite signaling, and cellular energy flow. Each macronutrient carries metabolic instructions. Adequate protein intake stimulates muscle protein synthesis and increases thermogenesis, meaning more energy is required to process the food itself, subtly raising metabolic expenditure while preserving lean tissue that anchors glucose control. Fiber-rich carbohydrates slow gastric emptying and modulate postprandial glucose excursions, preventing sharp insulin spikes that otherwise bias the body toward fat storage and reactive hunger. This steady release of glucose supports mitochondrial efficiency, allowing cells to generate ATP with less oxidative stress. Dietary fats, particularly unsaturated forms, contribute to membrane integrity and endocrine signaling, reinforcing satiety pathways mediated by peptide hormones that inform the brain about energy sufficiency. When meals are structured around these principles, the nervous system perceives nutritional stability rather than scarcity, which dampens stress-driven eating impulses and cortisol-mediated energy conservation. Micronutrients further influence enzymatic reactions that govern energy metabolism, thyroid activity, and inflammatory balance, meaning food quality directly shapes biochemical throughput. Over time, consistent nutrient timing trains circadian rhythms linked to insulin sensitivity and digestive efficiency, aligning internal clocks with predictable fuel availability. This coordination reduces metabolic noise, the chaotic fluctuations that strain appetite regulation, and promotes clearer feedback between gut hormones and central appetite centers. The result is a physiological environment where hunger cues become more accurate, energy partitioning improves, and stored fuel is mobilized without triggering defensive metabolic slowdowns, fostering a cooperative state in which nourishment signals safety, metabolic clarity, and efficient resource allocation across tissues that continuously adapt to dietary information through integrated hormonal and cellular communication pathways that sustain stable energy dynamics without provoking compensatory conservation responses. Movement after 50 is no longer solely about intensity or performance. It becomes a nuanced conversation with the nervous system that informs the body how safe, capable, and active it truly is. High-intensity or overly aggressive exercise, especially when repeated without adequate recovery, can trigger prolonged cortisol elevation, a hormone that signals threat and encourages the body to conserve energy, often promoting abdominal fat, storage, and blunted metabolic efficiency. By contrast, consistent moderate movement, walking, mobility exercises, balance work, or gentle resistance training communicates stability and predictability to the nervous system. Each repetition, each deliberate motion tells the brain resources are available, activity is safe, adaptation is possible, which reduces stress responses and encourages energy expenditure rather than preservation. This steady pattern enhances circulation, improves oxygen delivery to tissues, and supports mitochondrial function, effectively helping cells use fuel more efficiently. Movement also engages mechanoreceptors in muscles and joints, sending sensory feedback to the central nervous system that reinforces coordination, balance, and proprioception, all of which diminish the risk of falls and injuries that could trigger protective metabolic slowdowns. The rhythm of gentle, purposeful exercise promotes lymphatic flow and supports the body's natural detoxification pathways while maintaining joint health and connective tissue integrity. Over weeks and months, this approach strengthens musculoskeletal structures, enhances flexibility, and preserves functional independence, all without activating survival-based energy conservation circuits. Importantly, the psychological aspect cannot be overlooked. Predictable, sustainable movement fosters a sense of control and bodily confidence, which the brain interprets as low threat, further reducing cortisol and supporting optimal hormonal balance. In this way, movement becomes a language of reassurance, a daily dialogue with the body that encourages metabolic generosity, reinforces musculoskeletal resilience, and cultivates a sustainable energy rhythm that prioritizes long-term adaptability, allowing the metabolism to remain engaged, responsive, and capable of maintaining homeostasis across daily life patterns that integrate activity with recovery in a continuous, self-reinforcing cycle. Sleep after 50 is far more than a period of rest. It is a critical regulatory mechanism that orchestrates hormones, metabolism, and cellular repair. As we age, the architecture of sleep shifts. Deep restorative phases may shorten, and awakenings become more frequent, yet the physiological need for those stages remains unchanged. During slow-wave sleep, growth hormone secretion peaks, supporting tissue repair, muscle maintenance, and fat metabolism, while also enhancing insulin sensitivity, which helps the body direct nutrients efficiently to cells rather than storing them unnecessarily as fat. REM sleep, with its intense brain activity, consolidates memory, modulates stress responses, and fine-tunes the nervous system, which in turn influences appetite regulation through hormones such as leptin and ghrelin. When sleep is fragmented or insufficient, leptin, the satiety signal, drops, and ghrelin, the hunger signal, rises, creating a metabolic environment that drives cravings for high-calorie foods and encourages fat accumulation. Beyond hormonal balance, sleep allows the immune system to recalibrate, inflammatory markers to reduce, and the nervous system to recover from daily stressors, all of which contribute indirectly to weight regulation. Sleep also interacts with circadian rhythms, guiding the timing of digestive processes, energy expenditure, and thermogenesis, essentially setting the body's internal clock for optimal fuel utilization. Poor or inconsistent sleep disrupts these rhythms, blunting metabolic flexibility and creating a physiological state that favors energy conservation rather than expenditure. Prioritizing sufficient high-quality sleep through routines, light management, and mindful winding-down practices communicates to the body that it is safe to allocate energy toward repair, adaptation, and fat mobilization. In essence, sleep acts as a master regulator, coordinating the intricate network of hormones, enzymes, and neural circuits that determine how efficiently energy is processed, stored, and released, reinforcing metabolic clarity and supporting weight management. Efforts by creating a foundation where the body's natural intelligence can operate with precision and balance. Psychological alignment plays an often underestimated but profoundly influential role in safe weight loss after 50, because the brain does not simply respond to numbers on a scale or calories consumed. It responds to patterns, expectations, and signals of safety. When lifestyle changes are aggressive, erratic, or punitive, the nervous system interprets them as threats, activating survival circuits that elevate cortisol, encourage energy storage, and make the body resistant to fat loss. Conversely, behaviors that are consistent, manageable, and compassionate create a different internal narrative, one in which the brain recognizes predictability, stability, and cooperation rather than danger. Over time, this alignment fosters neural pathways that reinforce positive habits, making them automatic and reducing internal conflict between desire and restraint. It also shapes self-perception because identity and behavior are intertwined. Seeing oneself as capable of gradual, sustainable change encourages adherence, which in turn reinforces physiological adaptation. Mindful eating, structured movement, and thoughtful recovery practices communicate to the brain that the body is being respected, reducing the activation of defensive metabolic responses. Psychological alignment also interacts with reward pathways. Celebrating small, meaningful victories releases neurotransmitters that encourage repetition of beneficial behaviors, effectively teaching the nervous system that healthful routines are rewarding rather than punishing. This creates a feedback loop where the brain's expectation of cooperation allows metabolism to operate without resistance, appetite to remain balanced, and energy to flow efficiently. Stress reduction strategies, journaling, and reflective practices further support this alignment by calming overactive threat circuits, enhancing focus, and fostering patience, which are all critical because lasting weight regulation is a gradual, adaptive process. In this way, the psychological environment becomes a foundational signal to the body. When the brain feels safe and supported, metabolism is more generous, recovery is optimized, and the body's natural intelligence can orchestrate the complex biochemical symphony of energy use, storage, and mobilization in harmony with long-term lifestyle goals.